Tom Beekman is our Asset Management and Performance Measure Chief. Kind of just a new job, right? Just recently. So don't confuse access management with asset management, as was talked about yesterday. But at the same token, Tom has experience in both. We call him kind of our master Yoda. We go, and I say that tongue in cheek, but he's kind of the dean of access, and whenever we need to go to somebody very wise and have a lot of knowledge about access or past history with things, we kind of frequently go and call Tom, and he's been just a wealth of information. So he's been with the DOT, Wisconsin DOT, 34 years. Seems just like yesterday, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
I know. So started out with being a construction supervisor and supervisor of technical services and master chef. No, I'm sorry, I'm reading the wrong one here. But anyway, Tom has been now working with the Foxconn project as well. No, not anymore.
Oh, I'm sorry. Very peripheral. No.
Oh, okay, sorry. Never mind that. But he's doing the asset management and performance measures, and he's going to be talking today about 34 years of observation and talk a little bit about planning as well. Tom?
Thanks, Bob. As Bob said, my current job is with... My current job is asset management performance measures, working with the administrator for our division at DOT. And I'll be touching on a link between what I'm doing now and asset management because it's heavily tied to performance-based engineering, practical design, which I believe is something that has been missing and needs to be re-energized in the world of access. And I'll touch on that today. Most of these are anecdotal observations. I'm not here to give you some technical E equals MC squares, theta divided by pi equals C kind of discussion on traffic operations. This is more of a practical observation of somebody who sat in the seat and had to make those decisions on a request one by one. So there are challenges to traditional access management, and it's kind of the evolution of change in my career. And before I go any further, I am an engineer, so I've been told many times I have a terrible use of white space on PowerPoint, so bear with me. It's just a lot of text, not a lot of pictures, but that's what you get when you ask an engineer to give a presentation. So what's happening? Well, development uses up all of the available quote-unquote spacing standards. So you're sitting there and you're in an organization just looking at your charts and your matrices and says, we need 500-foot spacing. You go, it's full. There's no room left to put somebody in there at 500 feet. And people are saying, well, we have to. That's a change. That wasn't like that when I first started. You had plenty of room. Now you're getting into areas where you do not have room to meet your nominal standards. Redevelopment doesn't mesh with the in-place standards. In the area of the state where I work, western Wisconsin, northwest Wisconsin, what you have is Old Main Street. A lot of those are houses. Now they're trying to convert them into small community urban areas, and that doesn't fit. It doesn't fit our standards. Fits that community, doesn't fit our standards. And That talk about that conflict that creates in relationships. Private property rights and legislative actions. A number of states, including ours, have had legislative action to restrict the authority of the departments because they see as being too punitive. You're willing to say no, you don't really explain why, you point to a chart, we don't get it, we'll change the law. And a rejuvenation in many states of the challenge of private property rights versus police power and governmental authority. That's changed. This is a big one. More rapid revolving door of state and local officials. They don't stick around. You achieve consensus and then 2 years later they're gone or less. This is elected officials. Hired local officials. That has rapidly accelerated the speed by which these people pass through my world. It's sort of a little bit like I've always observed like school superintendents in the state. I get hired here, and my first thing I do is start negotiating my next job over here, and I get a raise, and I go here, and you just kind of keep bumping. These guys come and go, and trying to achieve consensus or any long-term vision is impossible, almost, as well as it bings back and forth in terms of what they want from one day to the next. more rapidly revolving door of DOT access staff and managers. We don't stick around much anymore. We revolve. We don't get somebody coming in and says, I started here in access 34 years ago and I'm still here. Doesn't happen. So you have this interchange of people where it's all temporal, and the depth and breadth of knowledge is much more shallower and much more narrower. And people want immediate satisfaction as in terms of long-term. Immediate satisfaction, not long-term. Different value systems on access. That has really come out. Access is personal. 95% of the access that I've dealt with are singular access points. Us and that person, that developer, that person, rural locations, and in communities and populations under 5,000. That's what we deal with. Now I know you can go to this access conference and you'll have presentations about here's a half mile of Beekman Avenue in downtown USA where we've revamped all of this, we reduced the access points, we got turn lanes now, we got no parking, we got walking lanes, and I go, that's not access. That's a highway system operational analysis, of which access was a small part. If you're talking about access, that's when you're out there and you're going, the only thing you're talking about is me and you, right there. That's an access decision. You get beyond that, I'm going to argue that's a highway operational issue that affects multiple things where access is only a big part. In my community, all the larger communities are totally access controlled, or what I call dark highways. Eau Claire, Wisconsin, greater community of about 150,000, Highway 312, Highway 53, Highway 12, no driveways. Not one driveway in the entire community because they're all access statutorily controlled or they were purchased with no access. Big cities don't bother us. Rural areas, fringe areas, small communities is where we have our battlegrounds. Dark highways are those where you go in there and you go, access every 20 feet. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? You're going to fight that battle? It is what it is. So you sort of just kind of go, be intelligent. And I'll talk about that a little bit later as well. I talked about it was involved in access, but it's more of a system operational issue where access is only peripheral. State trunk highways account for a very, total roadway miles are very small in these communities, but they're viewed as the lifeblood corridor of the community. Development follows the extension of public utilities along the highway, creating urban fringes and transitional access areas. Push it down the highway, that's where we can get business, that's where we can get new tax base, and it's always along our highway. I shouldn't say always, but predominantly in these smaller communities. Redevelopment inside a community typically occurs on land abutting or near state trunk highway routes, creating change of use. No, you can't take those two houses out and put a Dollar General in because we told you before that's a private driveway. Heck no, we can't give you that. It's a change of use. Okay? You understand on that one? I'll talk about that a little bit later. Competing values. DOT focuses on state highways from high volume, high mobility. And that focus has deepened over the past decade with a national emphasis on freight mobility in international marketplaces. I mean, we're hammered on that. You have a role in the international marketplace, freight routes, OSOW, accommodate. So we have a diminished appetite publicly, legislatively, for any future highway expansions or relocations. I personally believe we've seen the high water mark of highway expansion in our state. It's just not an appetite there financially or politically or environmentally for us to go out there and start building 4-lane highways where we have 2. Going to be very rare that that's going to happen. So we're in a preservation mode. Now we hunker down. Don't let them take anything away from the 2-lane highways we have, and we take on a bunker mentality within the department in that regard. We want to get traffic through a community rather than to a community. Local community has a focus of stay and play. I want to attract businesses to stay in order for new citizens to come and stay and play in a place called home. And then I can attract visitors to come, stay, play, and spend. That's the focus. Yeah, but that driveway's too close. I don't care about the driveway too close. That's what my business wants. If I get a business, I get workers. If I get workers, they'll live here. If I get people who want this, they'll come visit us. That's their focus, short term, again. Competing values leads to a choice. Here's your choice as a community. Here's your choice as a department, if you're a DOT. You want to choose a relationship of conflict from separate missions? It's our highway. It's our highway. It's our standards. You do what we tell you. Here's our chart. No. You can make that choice. It's our community. Access equals development equals revenue lifeblood. I don't care if they're 5 feet apart. I need the business. Our school can't stay open if we don't get more tax base. We need the tax, we need the people. I don't care about that other stuff. Or you can choose a relationship of cooperation from shared values of public agencies. You got to approach it from a shared values perspective. Obligation to keep all roadways as safe as possible. If one thing brings people together, it's safety. Safety. I got too many cars, not enough cars. Is it safe? You get people's attention when you talk about safety. Obligation to use public dollars for the greater good of the entire public. You have to make people understand your value system and their value system. The mutual recognition of what's out your front window and what's upstream, downstream. I always go into communities and I go, look at, I understand when I sit here and I look out the front window of your community, this is the highway you see. It ends at this window pane and this window pane. I get that. This is your concern. When you step out of your house, I got to connect to that community, I got to connect to that community. What I do in front of your house affects those people's abilities to get their goods and their economy back and forth. I'll make sure that we can do as much as we can not to screw up what you see outside your window or help what's in your window, but understand that I have to do for other people. They all have a front window on different parts of this highway. So we got to make that work together, and I think that kind of approach kind of get people, okay, I get that. Somebody else has got a front window. Somebody else is trying to do what I'm trying to do. I get the fact that I can't ask for so much that I screw up somebody else's ability upstream or downstream. Shared values, success factors. So to the locals, help us help you. Interagency reviews. Create a process that allows you to have an intergovernmental conversation before any official governmental decision is made. Include DOTs as a review agency on any building permits, zoning changes, proposed redevelopment, any property that abuts the highway. A review agency has no authority other than to give you information. Local community has no obligation to take it. But you're having a conversation and you're developing relationships. This has been one of the more powerful things that we've been able to do when we get these relationships, when they just put us on as a review agency. We'll review it, we'll send it to you, use it or lose it, your choice. But we're in the conversation, and it is prevention. Ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Well, I don't have time to look at that. I'm too busy to look at that review. Well, if you don't look at it, I can tell you where you're going to be spending your time down the road when you're talking to the politician and your boss. It's about 10 times the amount of effort, and it's a lot more painful. Ounce of prevention. Nobody wins when a mortgage is secured, a contractor hired, a basement poured, and you discover there's no right of access to the abutting highway. This happens. Guy comes in for a fire number. And they say, you have a driveway permit? Driveway permit. Driveway permit. Yeah. In order to get a fire number, you're going to have a permit, state trunk highway. Calls us. That's purchased access. You have no right of access. What? All of this is in place. How does that happen? You got a mortgage company, you got a surveyor, you got a building permit review, all of these people, a lot of them private, taking money from this individual that don't have enough knowledge to be able to go have that conversation. But some communities will go, we don't worry about that. We have a clause in there that says it's the individual's obligation to get all the permits necessary. So if you're a local community, you go, not our fault. Fine print said it was his job to make sure he got all the permits. I look at that and I go, you can provide legal cover, but it doesn't protect you from a political firestorm when that person goes political. Ain't gonna help you. The public does not know what they don't know. And I'm gonna say that there is an ethics question on what a public agency should be doing to help educate the public. To stand behind the fact that you got fine print that said it was their job to get all the answers, I don't believe is ethical if you're a public entity. We have a job to educate them. If we educate them and they do something different, that's their problem. Again, just my personal anecdotes. Success factors. Educational firewalls, continuing education programs, hold seminars, the same stuff you're talking about here, but talk at a localized level. Get the zoning and permit staff, get the surveyors, get the realtors, get the title companies, get the mortgage company developers. These are the people that are taking a piece of the pie from the private individual who should know this stuff. By creating educational firewalls to unintentionally ignorant decisions, unintentionally, it's a distinct minority of situations where somebody's intentionally making an erroneous decision. But we're combative. It's wrong, we're going to fight you. Wait a second. How many of these people are purposely trying to do something wrong? They didn't know any better. So you're trying to get the people who should know better in the process and have them pick these things off. Success factor to a DOT. Are you big brother or are you a partner? Create a culture that focuses on partnerships rather than policing, a culture that understands it's an investment to have a partnership that pays dividends. When they ask you to, when the owner comes in and you review the permit and you take time to explain it to them and you're like, I don't have time for that. I don't have time for that. It's an investment. It's not a loss of your time. It's an opportunity of your time. It's built and maintained on trust. You have to stay with it. This is the big one. You have to be aware that you are genetically predisposed at a DOT to be big brother. And you have to fight it at every instance not to become big brother because it will overwhelm you. That is in our genes at a DOT to become big brother. So it has to be something you actively manage and actively are aware of. So what is your culture? Are you an enforcer of standards? Yes, no, pass, fail? Or are you a seeker of solutions? Let's check. So with any access applicant, conversation first, decision last. Create a process that allows you to have a conversation with the applicant. Just like we want to have a conversation with the local units of government who might be doing something, issuing permits for building. If they're coming to us directly for a permit to the state highway, have a conversation before the official application comes in. In Wisconsin, if they send you an official application, statutorily and by policy, they are in a prescribed process and we're limited to what we can say to them. Okay? They have submitted, all we can do is pass, fail them. Don't let that happen. We tell people, would you be willing to rescind your official application so we can talk about this first? Yeah, we'll pull that back. Then we talk to them. Then we go out there and look for solutions. And you're outside that official narrow hallway that's imposed upon you. Develop your, if you don't do that, this just devolves your process to pass, fail, yes, no, and only what was explicitly requested in the application. You're not looking for solutions. You're just responding to what they asked. That's different. You're only responding to what they asked. You're not seeking a solution. Think about that. Here you go. What if an applicant submits one option that is a no, but you know, when you looked at it, if he would have asked it 10 different ways, you could have said yes. What's your reaction to that? In your culture, would you see that as a failure on the part of the owner to do due diligence, or on the part of your department to educate that individual in terms of what he could have did? Is your culture, do you perceive yourself as too busy to provide advice, and as a result, you've instituted a policy of only responding to official applications, otherwise you won't talk to them? Been there, done that. But that staff that tried this, took about 2 months. They're not my staff anymore. Ain't gonna work. Ain't gonna work. Depending on how you answer these questions, I can tell you what you're spending your time on. If you're up there on the one side, you're going to have repeated challenge from elected officials. You're going to be defending yourself in any appeals process you have, and you're wondering why your upper management is looking for ways to quote unquote simplify the process, aka find a way to say yes and make this go away. I'm tired of the phone calls. You lose the whole process. Betterment, solutions-oriented culture. Think about solutions. Are you willing to permit a substandard access because it allows you to make the overall situation better than it currently is? You'd be non-wrong in denying the access, but it would be a hollow victory because from a public servant perspective, you failed to see the betterment opportunity for the applicant and the traveling public. Ethics issue, public licensing issue. What's your role? To help these people or to find a way to say no? You introduced a high risk for political fallout from the perception you're being unreasonable because you're forcing a less desirable solution, you're offering no solution at all. So the politician stands there and says, you're telling me you won't let me have a driveway at 499 feet because the station's 500, even though he puts the 499 and takes that driveway out, it's safer? Yeah, doesn't mean station. Get that, politicians say. Well, what are drugs say? So they go back and they start writing legislation saying this doesn't work. This will work. Performance-based analysis. Return to your engineering roots. This is what I'm dealing with now in our organization across the board. From everything we're doing, our design, our maintenance, our planning, it's getting into access management, it's getting into safety analysis, getting back to performance-based engineering. Use current operational, geometric, and safety data to vet assumptions of the standard. The decades-long evolution at DOTs has been from engineering on the fly in the field, the interstate days. Who was king? The project engineer in the field. To the development of standards presented in the forms of matrices, tables, charts, or diagrams for anything we want to do. You could operate purely in the world of charts and diagrams if you wanted to. Challenge. Prevent the presumption of standards to become blind adherence to standards, and where one loses the underlying science and math that created those standards. Charts are right. Charts, I was taught by the charts. I was taught by the matrices. Therefore, I have presumptive assumption that that's what I should be doing, and now I don't even look in the field anymore. I don't even look for betterment because now I have blind adherence to the standard, and I've lost the math. I've lost the science that created the chart. Value of it, it moves the discussion into the objective world of engineering analysis rather than the subjective world of development and land rights. Creates a forum that is controlled by professional engineering and professional planning and the ethics that professional licensing intend to do. I'm not going to argue with that landowner about it's not that bad. You get a professional engineer who's willing to sign off on that, give me the data, and we'll talk to you. It forces them to move from the emotional into the objective. And you can do that in a polite, objective way, and it gets you out of that. The level of subjectivity is impossible to ever argue in. Speaking from the numbers almost always outweighs speaking from opinion. Data and analysis is the governor on the volume knob of opinion, which allows logical conversations to occur. I actually made that one up. I don't have it copyrighted, so free use. The volume knob of opinion. I tell you what, that thing has no end to how loud that opinion knob can go when you get people in a room. Pick your access battles intelligently. Where you're going to remove them. Dark highways, like I described before, where it's already done in a reasonable standard. If you apply performance-based engineering at most dark highways, you'd find that a replace-in-kind development has no statistically significant operational impact. So what if it's change of use? Yeah, 8,000 cars a day out there, and this guy's going from 500 cars a day for whatever it was to 1,000 cars a day. You think that's going to have any difference on that terms of that highway? If you actually run the numbers, it's going to stay statistically insignificant. But no, change of use. Change of use. Can't do it. What our chart says. Only very, very significant redevelopment has a chance of statistically significant impact if you actually run the numbers. Statistical significance depends on actual data rather than absolute standards. You got to actually run the data that's present today. Do not confuse. Do not interchange. I emphasize, do not interchange the word term less safe with unsafe. Well, if you put one driveway, actually goes to driveway, it's less safe. Less safe is not unsafe. If I had one car, the interstate, that took you to this city, it makes it statistically unsafe. Less safe. One car isn't going to make the interstate unsafe. Similarly, it's more conflicts. More conflicts does not mean it's an unsafe level of conflicts. You have to run the numbers to validate that. You have to run the math. Blind adherence to standards, graphs, matrices, charts. Pick your access removal battles wisely. Avoid access management autopilot that uses policy and quasi-legalities to remove an access rather than operational data. I beat on this already. Change in ownership, change in use, alternative access to the local system. These are legal things that you can hang on, but because they're not based on numbers, the common man doesn't get it. And if the common man doesn't get it, most politicians won't get it, and you're in a battle. You're in a fight. I always hated the one that said, no, We're arbitrarily denying you because you got access to the local road system. I hated that one. Did it. That was our policy. Anybody here from Oregon? Legislator stepped in Oregon, passed the law. Oregon DOT, you cannot deny an access to the state highway system simply because a person has alternative access to the local highway system. You must deny only on the merits of its impact on the state highway system. Law in Oregon. Variance and exceptions. Here's what's interesting. Almost every access management guideline or policy manual I've read provides instructions, quote unquote, keep a record of the specific details of the variance. When you read what the details are, get the traffic data, get the crash data, get the this, they're doing performance-based engineering. They're returning to their roots. So when you do a variance, everybody's really into it. Got to cover everything. My question is, so why aren't we doing the same thing when we deny one? We don't do it, we deny it. We just, no, doesn't meet our charts. But when you do a variance, the manuals go way over, but rightly so. Do performance-based engineering so you can document why you're saying no. I argue we should be doing that for every no. Get away from the charts. Show the numbers. Record keeping. Variances and exceptions, if you're going to keep them internally, I would not do that. They get lost. They're easily overturned by future employees or ignored. They're perceived as a department document or an illegal document. Allow successive property owners to plead ignorance because I didn't know where they were. We store our permits. They're not variances, but our permits are stored in our office. We don't record them. So when a new landowner comes in, they go, I didn't know what it said. I didn't know what the last permit said. You're always dealing with that honest ignorance thing. Well, how am I supposed to know that there was a permit out there? I didn't know that process was there. So I always say record them. Record them so they run with the title. Any successive owner assumes the variance condition upon purchase of property. Now all those people are being paid when property gets sold. They have an opportunity to catch this before it gets too late. Politicians are not as willing to advocate for relief when the requirement was part of the property. 90% of the time, the politicians call me what they got to know, and they go, did you guys do this too? I said, no. They purchased the property with this already on the title. Walk away. They walk away. They're more concerned if they perceive we just took a what they think might be a punitive action today on the owner. If the owner bought the property with that condition, 90% of the time they walk away. So that's why I always like recording stuff on the property. Owner beware. Also, if you run that with the title, this is what I hear all the time. Well, if I say yes here, I'll have to say it everywhere. So I'm going to say no everywhere. It's a DOT speaking. Well, you don't. If you put the numbers, why you came up with the answer yes at that specific location, and that's in the variance and it's recorded, and the next person says, I want the same thing, you go, can you match these numbers? Do you have the same mathematical situation on your property as this one? Then we'll talk to you. If not, this gives you more ability to say no, not less. Very hard to replicate the uniqueness of those numbers from one case to the next. Yeah, I'm almost done. Planning means you have a plan. Here's where I'm going to have some more heresy. At 35, I'm actually 35 years at DOT, so I think I have some latitude to be a little heretic at this point in time. So I go, I'll plead guilty to planning heresy. From my DOT perspective, the value of the investment of a plan is the degree to which it can be statutorily recorded with authority vested in the department for making any changes. Is this the guy that just said, don't be big brother? Is this the guy that said he's only willing to work on something if we control the outcome? Yes, it is. The reason for this is I hear all this visioning. We're going to have a visioning. We got a DOT excess visioning plan. We work with the locals. Go back to the very first chart. How long are those people that you're having this Zen moment of visioning with going to be around? 6 months later, one of them's gone. 12 months later, 2 of them are gone. And their replacement goes, I had nothing to do with that. I'm not obligated to take that vision. There's nothing legal with that. So you put this time and energy to get this kumbaya moment, and then it's gone 6 to 12 months later, and now you're mad at each other because nobody's honoring a past promise, and your relationship of trust is shot. So my attitude was, we're willing to engage, but because we have to connect the dots across communities, then it allows us to be the stabling force. And if you have the mentality, I'm doing it not as a big brother, I'm doing it because I have a broader perspective. I'll work with your front windows. I'll tie your front windows together if I can. But I believe you can manage this in the proper way. Last one. It was that straw's fault. Land develops over time, traffic increases over time, and all operational conflicts increase in like manner. So applicant number 976 comes in, and he's identified it. Oh, here's the tipping point. With that access, you have to add lanes, got to put signals up, got to build a roundabout. Your fault. We'll give you an access, but you got developer fees of $2 million. What about applicant 1 through 975? Their straw's in the camel's back too. Why are you putting it all on 976? I always had a problem with this one. And I challenged my folks. I said, our job as a public agency is to anticipate development. We should be knowing when the tipping points are coming. We should be planning for that occurrence, and we have some obligation to foster economic development. So if one future access is going to turn it from a four-way stop to a roundabout, heaven forbid that we as a department aren't aware of that. Well, what? Law firms, 180T in a driveway, roundabout, we didn't know that. I mean, come on. That's our job, and we should be investing our money in anticipation of that, and not trying to hang it on, wait till that next guy comes, we'll get him to pay the bill. Ethics question, what's our role? Statutory authority, wield it wisely, and I won't beat on this. Statutes say you may win in court, but you'll lose in the court of public opinion. George Carlin, I have as much authority as the Pope, I just don't have as many people who believe it. DOT goes out there, we're in charge, we got authority. Public says, oh yeah? Well, I'm going to talk to my legislature about it. Oops. Couple last quotes. Staff turnover, I thought, is the biggest thing. You got to really pay attention to this. The old Greek, Eccleus, the man whose authority is recent is always stern. So they're going to come in and they're going to hang on to what they can, and they're going to see the chart, they're going to see the math. It's your job if you're a manager to say, no, understand the math. Pay close attention to that, because you can revert very quickly when you bring in new frontline people, because they're going to revert to what is easiest and is obvious. Last but not least, please just make it go away. A quote I've heard from management many times in 34 years. So you got to be, if you're that middle guy like I've been as a chief, you got to be that, how do I keep the staff engaged? How do I keep them performance-based? How do I prevent management from bailing on this stuff? In the course of my 34 years, I've seen, we get new secretary, I've had a half a dozen secretaries tell me this. I thought when I took this job, I'd be into these big interchanges and these big highways. Never did I believe I'd be spending half of my time talking about damn driveway permits. That's the stuff that they get. They get the public person complaining, it goes to legislature, they go right to the secretary. Anyway, that's really all I got at this point in time.